All right, we're recording, yes? And as people jump on, here we go. We got another guy. Yeah, people slowly come on. That's awesome. Chad, can you turn on your camera? Tito, you too. Turn on your cameras. We'd love to see faces. Love to see faces. There you go.
Unless you're in the
There it
bathroom.
is. There it is. Awesome, my man. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And as people come on, I'm going to just let them in and rock and roll. Just so you guys know, next week there will not be a webinar, and the week after there will not be a webinar. I'm taking 2 weeks off. I'm going to Israel. I'm going to visit the sites and help soldiers and feed soldiers and do all that kind of stuff, and visit my family and so forth. So I will be in Israel doing all that kind of stuff, and so
Be
for the
safe.
next 2 weeks.
Be
Thank
safe.
you. Yeah. We'll do absolutely.
Yeah. Be safe. A lot of craziness right now.
Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because I speak to all my friends and whatnot, and they're going, dude, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's not as bad as it sounds. I'm like, okay, because it sounds pretty bad from where we're at. It sounds pretty bad. But God willing, everything will be will be okay, All right, but let's get to it. I'm super pumped. Get a pen, get paper, get ready to take notes. I have a gentleman that I've met through a mastermind group that I belong to, and this mastermind group is full of the people that you want to hang around with, right? The people that will elevate you to the next level, the people that you look up to and you're starstruck because of the success, of the magnitude and everything that they've accomplished. And I'm blessed to be part of that group. And I tell you, when we are in our Facebook groups, when we're in our Zoom meetings, and I see people talking, it's just, I'm blown away by the success, the financial success that they've achieved, but also what they've done in their personal lives and the way they're giving back to communities and so forth. I always say, find the right room. You got to find the right room. And this is one of the rooms, and it's called Family Mastermind. And if anybody's interested in joining, reach out to me personally. I'll make the introduction to the gentleman that runs the group, Matt, and you guys can take it from there. But I mean, there's several hundred, 400 people, I think, in that mastermind group. And we get together twice a year or once a year in Tampa. And it's just 3-4 days of people networking and talking and building relationships and learning from one another. It's just incredible. So I have the honor today of bringing on Steve Richards, who I've met from this mastermind group. And Steve has 24 years of experience. He's built 7-figure businesses, flipped over 15 houses, and helped many entrepreneurs become effective CEOs. And I love his tagline, right? I love the tagline, man. It was great. How to turn your business into a math equation so you can solve for success, right? We're all real estate investors, right? We go out there and we buy real estate and we churn and burn the real estate, get investors and so forth, multifamily, single family, whatever you want to do. But no one really teaches us about business building, about how to structure it, how to go out in there and do it correctly so it actually can sustain us, right? So we're going to talk about understanding KIPs, metrics, scaling strategies, all that good stuff. And I'm starstruck. Every time I talk to this guy, I'm kind of like, I'm just like looking at this. I'm, oh yeah, because of what he's done, and Steve, I'm going to let you talk more about your success and what you've done throughout the presentation. But I want to stop talking because I want to take notes and I want to listen. So guys, Steve Richards, the man of the hour, take it away, brother.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, it's always really cool to connect more with folks in the family. The group that you mentioned that we're in together is it's like, first of all, it's private. There's no website. You can't buy your way in. You have to get invited. And it's just interesting that I'm the same way you are. I look at the Zooms, like in most groups I'm in, people don't get very engaged. And in this one, it's like every Thursday there's 50, 60, 80, 100 people getting on Zoom, and they're like a who's who of everyone that's got TV shows and, like whatever. Yeah, it's a big deal. I think you were just rushing a little bit. You said I flipped over 15 houses. It's 1,500.
1,500.
In case anybody was wondering, boy, that guy flipped. I was like, yeah, I used to do that in a week, by the way.
1,000 500. I mean, I apologize if I,
just to straighten out one little thing. But yeah, you know what's funny is before I get into this, I'll just tell you guys. I mean, we've really connected, like not only at a business level, but a deeper personal level, and some of that's going to come through tonight.
Yep.
There's two things I want to say before we get into this presentation, and I know there's not a ton of people on tonight, but I'm sure the replay will go out or get hosted, whatever. And whoever's here is supposed to be here, and whoever's supposed to hear this will. So I hope this resonates with you guys. But we are going to talk about KPIs. That is the main goal. But I have two kind of precursors with that. One is the methodology that we apply in business to use the KPIs is the same one. It's why at 40, I'll be 50 in a couple months. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm the strongest I've ever been. My marriage is the best place it's ever been. My parenting is in the best place it's ever been. It's literally the same thing. It's the same methodology. I'm going to talk about that tonight. So this isn't like if you guys are out trying to buy multifamilies and you have a day job or you have a different investing business, and this isn't about like just creating a business. This is about a way to treat your life. And a lot of people are like, oh, you should treat your life like your business. You should have goals and KPIs. No, really, there's a way to do life. And people usually only look at it in their business. They don't get that same structure in the rest of their life. They might in their health. Like for me, I track KPIs. I'm going to talk about it, but like probably more deeply in my health right now than I do my business, because my businesses, I have COOs and people running them. But in my health, like it's very important for me to, track every gram of food that goes in my body and every rep or set that I do in the gym and all my micros with my blood work and so many things like that. So what I hope tonight is we talk about some things that will absolutely change your business. I'm positive of that. But it will change any part of your life that you want to apply it to. So that's the other side of this, is I hope that you just get something to take away for life in general. And just to put a couple things in place before we start, regarding my bio or what I've kind of not, I don't really want to get into the details. I'm happy to answer any questions people have about all the things I've done. But when I got out of college in 98, 26 years ago, I was doing tech consulting for .coms. And I did that for 2 or 3 years until the .com bust happened. And then I was busy with a lot of Y2K projects. If some of you guys might not be old enough to remember, but everyone thought the computers were going to shut down. They literally thought the world was going to end. Kind of like AI now, everyone thinks AI is going to make the world end. Every 20 or 30 years, there's some shit that's going to make the world end. And so that's just how it works, right? But it was really interesting times. So I've always been coaching and consulting, but I got into real estate in 2004. And that's when I left corporate America after, well, it was 2005 when I left. So about 7 years in. And it was interesting because the first 500 or 600 houses I flipped was all uphill. I mean, it took 9.5 years. It took 9 years to get to 7 figures in my business.
wow.
And I was just all pushing. And I was just a self-employed hustler. I had a big team. I had 30 agents in my brokerage. I had 12 or 13 people that worked in my investment company. I had 25 or 30 subs that worked in my construction company, and endless amounts of other people that we hired, contractors that we brought in. We had a property management company, had 8 or 9 employees. And so like, there's like 100 families feeding themselves off of these businesses we had that I ran with no integrator, no COO. I mean, I had no business doing what I was doing at the time. Now that I understand how to run a business, but I was a self-employed hustler that just figured out how to get a team around me to help me do more. And all it did, I was a freaking arson, and all that helped me do was start more fires. It literally, the first year I hit 7 figures was the least amount of money I had made in 5 years, because I just spent my way to it. That's like these goals that we have a lot of times. Like if you want to do $1 million business and you spend $1 million to get there, would you rather have a $500,000 business that only cost you 200 grand to get there? Like 100%. And so we need these qualifying goals and like understand, like that's the beginning of some of these KPIs. Like we look at one KPI, like one major one is how much money did I make? It's lagging revenue. Well, that's only relevant in relation to profit, and to expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the beginning of starting to understand some numbers. But after the first 10 years, I had a kind of a midlife crisis early, and I was going into the worst year of my life, which was when I would turn 40. And I was 45 pounds heavier, and I had less muscle than I have now. So my body fat was just ridiculous. My health was bad. My business was bad. I hated what I was doing, and I started imploding, and I kind of rebuilt things. And so over the next 3 or 4 years, it only took me 3 years to hit 7 figures again. I closed that business, all of them down. I started wholesaling residential property. Um, and I just built it the way I wanted to build it. And two things happened. One is I actually learned about KPIs. Like I really learned them, hopefully like at least the foundation of what I'll teach tonight. And secondly, I learned how to hire people, which happens to be another company I own called Team Architects. And I realized like that company only exists because I realized all of us business owners are literally, there's a reason that big companies have HR departments and recruiters and COOs, because entrepreneurial people are the worst at hiring. We put an ad on Facebook. We meet somebody's wife at our church.
Right.
It's our neighbor's kid. It's our cousin's boyfriend. Like it's like we'll pull anybody who we think we deserve, but we really need to hire up, because when we hire someone above us, they pull us up. When we hire someone that fits with us now, they anchor us down to where we are. And it's really, really hard. And so I'm not going to talk a lot about that tonight, but that might be another masterclass to run down the line, is all I've learned. And our Team Architects company has a killer assessment, and we can make that available to this group too. Like I'll put a link together if you guys want to see what that assessment's like. If you've ever done DISC or anything like that, it's all of those combined on steroids and still way better. It really is a game changer. But I'll say all that as the last thing before I get into this presentation is we can help you, or we can teach you how, or you can hire our recruiters to hire the perfect person. But if you don't have KPIs figured out, it won't matter, because they'll either quit or get fired within 3 to 6 months, more than likely, because they won't get managed well. They won't get trained well. They won't get onboarded correctly. You'll botch something up. And if you don't understand the numbers of your business, you're flying blind. And even if you make a great hire, it's kind of worse, because on paper it looks really good, and then they come in and it doesn't quite work and you don't know why. It's because you don't have all the details figured out, the nuance. And if I've got a sales guy, and not only do I want to track like maybe how many contracts on assets he gets and how many closings we have, but I need to know how many offers he made and how many clients did he qualify and how many appointments did he set and how many did he hold, because maybe he's bad at holding them. So he gets a lot of reschedules that never happen. It's a reschedule. It turns into a cancel, but like there's all these interesting metrics along the way. And I might get mad at my sales guy because he didn't make enough offers this month. And I start to train him on how to make offers better. But I might find out he's only supposed to offer on a certain percentage of appointments that finish, and he offered on a higher percent. He's actually really good at offering, but he didn't have enough appointments. He's actually bad at booking appointments. But I sent him to training for getting better at negotiating and pitching offers, because I didn't know better. He just wasn't getting contracts. So I thought I'd train him how to. So I have a misguided management and training approach, because the numbers aren't telling me what's wrong. And so that's the level of nuance we can get into. And so I'm going to dive into this presentation. And this is like if you guys want to use a Q&A or chat or just blurt out, I don't really care how we do it, but I just want it to be interactive. But I'm going to cover stuff pretty fast, because I want to get to the back end of it where we can do Q&A. And then I'll make all the slides available so you can send them out as a PDF.
Awesome. Thank you.
So everyone's going to be like taking screenshots. I know there's going to be recording too, but like we'll make all this available. Anybody got any questions before we start?
No, man.
Cool. All right. So the CEO Nation, just really quickly, is my coaching business. What I feel best at right now, my purpose in life is my calling is to help business owners find their way. And if you're in the 1 to 10 million range of revenue and you're working more than 10 hours a week, and you don't want to be, but you're the kind of person that can help. But what's interesting is Team Architects or all these, even being involved in Family Mastermind, I'm on the commission that helps run that. There's also a mastermind called Boardroom. Some of you guys may have heard of it. Kent Clothier's group. He's my business partner in Team Architects, by the way. I help run Boardroom. I'm involved in some other groups and have a couple other businesses. And like everything is wrapped around business owners, a lot of real estate people, but really anyone who is involved in business who's trying to find their way. And what I mean by find their way is like the reason we do anything is to uncover who we are. It's why you want to own $100 million of assets. It's why you want $10 million of cash in the bank. It's why you want to get a great marriage. It's why you have kids. At the end of the day, the reason we do anything, if you want to play that game with me, I'll ask you, why do you want to do that? And you'll tell me, and I'll say, well, what does that do for you? And then I'll say, well, why does that matter? And after 2 or 3 rounds of that, I'm always going to get to the fact that you're just trying to understand who you are so you can feel loved and feel safe and feel secure, provide that same thing to your family. And that's where I'm at in life. And so I want you guys to know that undertone on this. And the CEO Nation is just it's when I have direct one-on-one coaching with people. That's what this business is. The goal tonight is to help you to create control over your results. I don't care if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to have a better marriage, or if you're trying to buy 1,000 units, multifamily units, like whatever it is, this is about manifesting. And kind of the couple of things I like to say about KPIs, there's one I didn't put on here too, but these first 2 are that you can't expect what you don't inspect. A lot of you guys have probably heard that, but if you're not tracking a number, you shouldn't be holding anyone accountable to that situation. Whatever the situation is that you have some level of desire to produce some level of results, if you're not tracking numbers around it, it's not fair to hold that person accountable to a subjective, production. You owe it to yourself and the team to put numbers around everything so that it's objective. And, what gets measured can be managed. That's kind of that same point. If you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. It'll become very frustrating. The other thing is, I didn't put this one on here, but you guys might want to write this one down. If you're already closing deals or you have a business where you're generating revenue, or even if you have your day job and you're producing work, if you are producing any kind of results and taking action towards anything in your life, you already have KPIs. You're just not tracking them. You may not know what they are. You don't know how to define them. You don't know what they're called. Maybe you don't know where to find them. You're not typing them into a place where you can use them. And maybe you're not knowing how to proactively make decisions based on them, but they exist. As soon as you start taking action, KPIs exist because there's activities. And then especially when there's results, now the magic can start happening. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Kind of initially, and I put business owners on here because that's usually who I'm talking to, but I crossed it out and said, this is people in general. Most people are reactive instead of being proactive, and they're stuck in the weeds. What that looks like is they don't really utilize metrics or KPIs, and they don't really have any control. And the one KPI, if there is one that almost everyone will use, is the balance of their checking account or their operating account. It's the one lagging number that people will actually look at. And so if you wake up and there's whatever, 100 grand or $1 million or whatever sitting in your account, wherever you're at in life, or 10 grand or wherever you are, you're happy if that's good for you. But if you're way lower than you thought, your mood and everything is driven by that. But if you're tracking everything, it's kind of like balancing your checkbook. Like you could have, like if you normally have 50 grand sitting in your account and there's currently 100 in there, and you wake up and you're like, cool, man, I can go buy some shit. I'm doing pretty good. But if you don't know that you already have like 110 going in the next month, on deposits and earnest monies and, whatever, and CapEx on your properties or whatever, you're actually 10 grand in the hole right now. You just haven't realized it yet. And so it's all relevant. These leading indicators would be like, commitments you're making to spend money that you just haven't written the check for yet. And so we've got to start to look earlier in the pipeline, what's driving the results, because by the time it gets to the, P&L or our checking account balance, our operating account, it's too late. We can't do anything about it. It's already happened. It's what we would call a lagging indicator. I'm gonna get into that in a minute. But most people focus on those lagging indicators and they're trailing numbers because they trail time. Let me go back. Sorry. So they lag from whatever caused them to when we realize it. There's a lag in time. And during that lag, we lose control of making our outcome different. We'll talk about leading indicators in a little bit. But if you're not familiar with that, a leading indicator is an activity that drives that result. And we usually, if we're watching that in real time, we have time to react to it. Respond, really, not react. It's really respond. Be responsible. Like the ability to respond is responsible. And so when we're watching activities, we can respond to it, which makes us more responsible in our business. And we can usually change the outcome ahead of time. This is what's at stake. I kind of already said it, but understanding what we're going to talk about tonight will help you with all these things in your life. Whether you want to be more spiritually connected, you want to give more money away, you want to have better friend, experience, you want better quality in your relationships with your spouse or your kids, you want more emotional intelligence. It's obviously very prevalent in your business, but also your health and your mental stability. And so this concept is important. And I've had a lot more luck over the years teaching it, not about business, where people are like, oh, that makes sense. And then they can apply it to their business. So I'm going to try to talk about both tonight. I already kind of went through this, but most lagging numbers, I want you to really hone in on these concepts here. There's three concepts: lagging, leading indicators, and then ratios. I'm going to cover those right now. Lagging indicators are results. So if you're ever wondering, is a number lagging or leading? The kind of the rule of thumb is a lagging indicator is always a result. It's something that you find out what it is after it's happened. And so these are definitely important, but they only give you part of the story. And it can skew your perspective if you're only looking at part of the story. And although they can lag by years, depending on what, kind of models or in strategies or businesses you're in, but they're usually at least 1 to 3 months lagging. That's the best case scenario, is that by the time you find this number out, whatever caused it was 1 to 3 months ago. I'm not going to go into this, but if you guys, I probably should have polled you a little bit to understand who's on, but like if you're business owners or do regular investments, a huge thing that you need to understand is your cash conversion cycle. Like when you put money into something, how long does it take to kick money out the back? If you're running a business, a lot of times it's when you put money into marketing and then you have money that comes out the back. In this business, it might be when you start buying, environmental studies and paying for down, whatever, like you start putting money into a deal or go hard with earnest money, things like that. You're putting money in. And when do you start to realize any money out the back? And how long does it take? And how, by the time you realize, it could be staggered too, because you might be getting it back in increments through cash flow instead of just a resale of a property. And so that cash conversion cycle is important, because if you have a business that takes a year when you put money in for it to kick money out the back, and you have lagging numbers that can tell you what's going on within 1 to 3 months, that's actually okay. If you're a residential wholesaler and you're trying to flip your contracts in 1 month and it takes you 3 months to find out what's going on, you're screwed. Like you can go bankrupt because you'll have been blowing money into marketing and paying staff for months by the time you figure out that you're like just throwing money into you're just lighting it on fire. And you're just creating a bigger problem. So when you finally find out, it takes longer to unwind. Does that make sense? I know some of you guys are on camera, but when I'm in this presentation mode, I can't really see anybody. So make sure you guys speak up. I'm not seeing head nodding or anything, but, so differently, leading numbers are very important, like I was saying. And so this is the other half of the equation. Like the equal sign is on one side is the lagging number. So like the other half of the equation that you have to settle to get to that is these leading numbers. These are usually the X and the Y equals whatever. And like X and Y is what kind of money you put in or what kind of people you employ or what kind of effort. Like those are the activities. Like these are the things that like minus and plus and divided and multiplied, equals into the result. And so these activities are really important because we can actually get into real-time control within our business. So if all you do is ever focus on, well, I'm gonna hold on that analogy. I've got a good analogy I'll give to you guys in a second. But one key thing that you'll learn when you start to focus on leading indicators is that you can take the ups and downs of a business out. Because when you look at lagging indicators, it's like things seem okay, and then you don't realize they're gonna go down. And by the time it takes 1 to 3 months or whatever, by the time to finally hit and show up in your bank account, you're like, oh shit, and you try to fix it. It's already still going down, 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 down. And if it takes you a month or two to make some changes to start to see it, starts to come up, and the same thing will happen again. And the ups and downs of business a lot of times are because you're watching lagging numbers, because all the real decisions you're making are made after a lag. I mean, that's the number one reason that almost everyone under $1 million and many under 5 to 10 have ups and downs. Like the number one complaint they have about their business is inconsistent results.
And that's because we're looking at the lagging numbers. That's because we're looking at, okay, money's coming into the bank account in 3 months from now. And we're making decisions based on that, rather than making leading activity decisions based on how can we get more investors.
How many leads came in?
How many leads?
How many offers? How many LOIs am I writing? Yep.
All right, gotcha.
It's that, and it's also not putting equal effort in. The other thing that happens is like when you're under capacity, if you get really busy in due diligence and you quit marketing, your leads are drying up, and then you buy a property, and then you're invested in CapEx, and you're doing all that, and then you're in the execution and transaction, and you're going through the throes of the renovations and stuff and stabilization. And then you finally start to see and then you're like, oh man, I got to find some deals. And then you go back because you have an inconsistent effort. And as they relate to each other, there's 3 pieces of the business. There's marketing, there's sales. And in this multifamily, that's really like, doesn't have to be marketing, but it's finding opportunities or looking at opportunities or networking for them or whatever you do to get in front of them. And the conversion is more due diligence than sales conversion. It might be negotiating price, but it's also due diligence. And then there's execution on the back end. And when you have a disparate amount of effort into those, you'll also create the ups and downs. So those are the 2 reasons. One is you're looking at numbers that are way beyond the time when they happened. And so you're making slow decisions. And the other one is you're just not putting a consistent effort in. So you get an inconsistent effort out. Those are the 2 core reasons that I've noticed that people have ups and downs in any business.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned. It's not funny, but it resonates because in multifamily, we get so caught up in finding the deal, looking for the deal, searching, talking to the brokers, researching, underwriting, blah blah blah. That when you get a property under contract, now people looking left and right go, oh shit, man, I haven't done any networking, I haven't raised I haven't built relations, I haven't done any of that. Or like you said, we go through the motions, we close on a property, and then we look up and we're like, wait a minute, I haven't continued my social outreach. I haven't networked. I haven't talked to brokers yet. I haven't done any of that. So now, and it's always, it's as if you get the engine rolling, you get the engine started, it starts to cruise, then you put it on neutral and it kind of slows down, and then you got to rev it up again. So I totally see that whole lagging and leading activities, that's something that we definitely have to keep an eye on. And in multifamily, I talk to my coaching clients that you got to build a team so that while someone's underwriting, someone's talking to a broker, someone's out networking, someone's out doing the ops, doing all that, right? And I'm sure you're going to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Think of it like spinning plates. You can only spin a couple.
Right.
You can spin more than one, and the more entrepreneurial you are, you can spend more than other people, and you get pretty good at doing robbing Peter to pay Paul, and screwing up and like batting our eyes at people and using our charm to be like, oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to send the investor statements. Or it's like, trust me, everything's fine. I'll get the accounting done later. Like, there's all these things that we can miss steps on that like we shouldn't, but that allows us to not have to spin. But once we can get one person in charge of every plate, that's when it spins really well, because they can be like, oh, when I hit it like this, it spins better when it, or if I use this hand, or if I use both hands, like they start innovating and optimizing. They spend all their time focused on that one plate. To your point, that's when things start humming. Many
Right.
people try to do that through partnerships, and it can work, but it's, partnerships fail at a much higher rate than businesses, and businesses already fail at an 80-90% rate. Partnerships fail at 300 to 500%, because most guys I know that stay in one business for 10 years or more, or gals, have had 2 or 3 partners.
Right.
So at a minimum, business partnerships fail at 300 to 500%, probably more. And so we're not going to get super deep into team tonight. That is a whole nother thing we could do sometime that I'd love to work with you. I have a lot of knowledge in that realm, but I will say most partnerships are based out of fear. But they're also based out of necessity, because you just can't do everything. But one problem, because we're on that topic, so I feel called to maybe just mention this. If you guys are partnering and people are considering it, that like almost, it's not the worst thing you can do, but one of the least optimal things you can do is go find a like-minded person and partner up. And then you're very like overlapping in what you bring to the table. And then you do twice as much together, and you cut it in half at the end, and you wind up with the same, but now you have a partnership where you have to get everything approved. You don't get ahead. You need to be in a partnership where 1 + 1 is 3 or more. When 1 + 1 is 2, it's just guaranteed there's going to be resentment at some point,
Right. That's
because
right.
someone will start pulling more weight than the other. But even if someone's pulling a little more weight, but if 1 + 1 is 4, because you just
Mhm.
have very complementary skills, and one's really doing, they're not worried about time balance. You're like, bro, that guy takes stuff that I hate. I am fine with splitting things 50-50. I know I'm in the office more, but I would never want to do that. Or whatever the case is like, then there's some magic that's made. So when 1 + 1 is like 4 or 5, nobody's like, yeah, I think I work more hours than you. Or, it's not really fair, because everyone's making money because it's working. So, yeah, that was a good little divergence we got into for a second. So hopefully you guys got some good notes out of that. Like, whenever you're going to partner with someone, I've got a whole strategy on it. And we could talk about that on another class if we want, but really the main thing is to get really aligned with where you're headed in 3 to 10 years. Like, don't talk about it together, separately. Go through where do you want to be in, like, down the road? How many employees, how much money, how many assets, whatever. What are you going to spend your time doing? And then come together and see if you're anywhere near on the same page. You got to get on the same page to the North Star. And then the second step would be talking about what are your skills and my skills. Our team architects assessment comes in really handy during that. But how do you converge, conflict, complement, and then who's going to do what? Now we can create an operating agreement finally, and then we can decide to partner. But like, many people decide to partner first and figure it out later. But I would say get on the same page where you're headed, know whether or not you're good partners. Because if you're both just owners of a business, if there's 2 of you, that doesn't matter, because you can both be the exact same guys or gals and own a business, because you're not involved in it. It's when you're involved in the day to day and most of the responsibilities are falling on you two. If there's 2 or 3 of you, you 2 or 3, that's when this matters a whole lot, to make sure that you understand what everybody brings to the table. Okay. Back to what we were talking about. So this is just kind of some like rule of thumb stuff for leading and lagging indicators. So lagging indicators are results. Like I said, they show you what's already happened. So they're after the fact. If you want to think about a plane, they're like the instruments and the gauges. And they're great for keeping score over time. They show up after it's too late, but they do give you insight. Like, so you can gain a lot of insight from looking at these lagging numbers. And they're things like revenue, marketing expense, cost per lead, how many agreements you signed, how many LOIs you sent out, things like that. They're like after something's done. So the leading indicators are the activities. This is what should happen. And so part of this is we have to understand some industry standards, and we're going to talk about this, but like if I just know how many LOIs I put out, there should be an industry standard on, based on asset class and underwriting, all these things, like and what my criteria is and my risk tolerance on my underwriting. I should know what percentage I should be getting contracts accepted. And out of accepted contracts, I go into due diligence. I should know what percent are going to fall out and which ones are going to close, roughly over time. They're also, these are like the dials and the buttons and the levers. So different than the instruments and gauges, which are giving you information, they're reading what has already happened, like your altitude or your speed or whatever, and they're telling you because it already happened. Well, the dials and the buttons and the levers, the things that you actively do that make shit happen, like those are the leading indicators. And we want to use this to manage and lead the day to day. We don't want to manage and lead the day to day, particularly from the lagging numbers. Now, those do come into play over time, but they're like a general overarching theme. And this is more about understanding from a day to day basis what activities are being done. What's crucial in that is knowing which activities matter, right? Because we could say one of the activities is wake up in the morning. I could track how many mornings I wake up, all of them. It's not really indicative of success. I guess it is. I guess I can't get a property bought if I don't wake up today. Driving to the office is another thing if you have an office or whatever. Turning your computer on. There's all these things we do. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but some activities just matter a whole lot more than others. These show up in real time, and different than the insight, these give us foresight. And most of us are working from hindsight. So if we can at least learn better, we can get to insight, but eventually we also really want to get to foresight, which is kind of having a crystal ball and seeing around the corner and being able to estimate what should happen. These are things like how many marketing pieces we dropped, how many leads were generated, how many appointments we booked, how many offers we made. These are activities, like I said. Before I get into this, anyone have any questions? Okay. So this is, I'm just checking the chat. I saw. Oh, okay. I thought someone had a question on indicators. So this is how we can decide if something's a leading indicator or not. If it's controllable, or not really if it's a leading indicator, but this is how we can decide which ones we want to focus on. There's two things. If it's controllable, like we can influence it, and if it's indicative of success. So putting marketing out or going to network with, brokers is extremely controllable because I can like go on meetup.com and see where there's a multifamily meetup in my city, and I can drive. I have a lot of control over showing up at that meeting and talking to people. Highly controllable. Is it indicative of success? Well, a little bit, but getting an LOI completed out, getting like pre-due diligence done and getting an LOI submitted and signed is really indicative of getting into a deal. But it's not very controllable. So we want to look somewhere in the middle that has some level of control that we can influence it, and it's somewhat indicative. So like in your guys' space for this conversation we're having tonight, if it's about multifamily, which I'm actually talking about KPIs for your life, but I'm going to talk about it here too for this. It's probably in the due diligence, like the pre-due diligence is probably some of the most important leading is like, yeah, you see a lot of deals, but how many do you actually start to pull comps on and get due diligence or like sign an NDA and have, the financials set over and you start reviewing financials? Like that starts to become somewhat controllable, but a little bit more indicative. It's kind of in the middle. Does that make sense? So anything we're doing that we want to move the dial on, move the needle, we want to try to understand not all leading indicators are equal. It's the ones that are kind of in the middle, and we want to find 2 or 3 of them, and they're a blend of these 2 things. So when you're like, hey, should I track this number? You want to think to yourself, well, how in control of that number am I of making that happen, that activity? And this activity, how indicative, if I do it over and over again, is there a correlation directly that I can see that leads to the result that I'm looking for? And then we can start to define these leading indicators. Here's my favorite part. And I'm a dork, and KPIs are like one of my love languages. And so like, I geek out on this is why I says like one of my favorite parts is math. So if leading indicators are like the more important ingredient in this recipe, the secret sauce that we dump in to make the dish is ratios. It's when we divide the activity and the result into each other. Like how many LOIs were submitted versus contracts signed? How many assets did we review versus offers made? How many properties put under contract did we close on? So we're dividing most of the time. Sometimes it's multiplication, but it's mostly dividing. We start to get into where this becomes, that's where the pivot from like strategic to tactical happens. And so like, I'm going to get into it with health, but this is when I start to track like my body fat percentage. It's like a combination of dividing some numbers together, which means that my weight and my muscle mass are in relation towards a goal. So if I just wanted to weigh a certain amount and I just starved myself and I got to that weight, I might lose all my muscle too. If I wanted to have $1 million business, I might spend $1.1 million to get there. And so when we do math between a leading indicator and a lagging number, it starts to get, especially if it's a leading one that is important that we're tracking and a lagging result we care about, that division creates a percentage that can roll up to a report with percentages. Is that making sense to you guys? That ratio is where it comes to life, because now once I have that, I can start to track my desired, my goal versus my actual. Like what percentage of this is happening versus what really happening versus what should be happening. When I start comparing an actual to a goal instead of an actual, like the numbers might themselves, like how many offers I made, is only relative in combination to other numbers. Like it matters how many at bats I got versus how many offers I made. Like, so when I divide the number and I know what my closing ratio is, that's independent of the volume I'm producing. I can see what percentage I have success. So I might, if I'm trying to buy 2 assets in a year and I thought I needed to, convert whatever, 2%, 2 out of 100 assets I look at, I'm gonna get. And I'm frustrated because I only bought 1 this year and I think I didn't convert well, but I only looked at 50 assets and I got 1 out of 50. I'm still at 2%. So my conversion's fine. It's my traffic that's an issue. I don't have enough opportunity. That's what this can do for you, is to understand these ratios can start to take the nuance out of it. The volume, like you're looking at volume versus like percentages. This is where anything you're doing, when you get to these ratios, is where it all starts to make sense, no matter what aspect of business you're involved in. If you want to think about this, like,
is everybody understanding the ratios? Can you explain that one more time?
Yeah. So like, think of it this way. Like if all I cared about was expenses or revenue, I could say, oh, I only want to spend 500 grand this year. And I spend 500 grand. I'm like, cool, I hit my goal. Well, what if I only made 400?
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to be at a 30% profit margin, that's a percentage where I'm dividing the expense and revenue into each other. And I know what my profit margin is. Like, so if I want to know what my closing ratio is, that's a very interesting number to me. It's like, how many offers do I make that turn into a contract? If all I do is look at how many contracts I signed, it's only relative to other numbers. Does that make sense?
Right.
But
Right.
when I divide them into each other, the relativity is taken away because now I have a percentage that helps me understand success. This is like the hardest part of the concept, but it's like where the rubber meets the road, because everyone that I've helped, and I've coached hundreds of people, I've trained thousands of them. I've been involved in these two masterminds. Like you said it alone, between the two masterminds I help run, there's like 600 businesses. And I'm tangentially involved. Like I see a lot of things. Everybody, there's a couple things. One of them, no one has some CRM figured out that gives you all the numbers you want. I don't care how tricked out your Go High Level is or whatever you're using, your DealPath software, whatever you're using. It's not giving you all the numbers you need in the way you need it. You're going to be using a spreadsheet. Everyone I know has a real business, has 2 or 3 places where they pull numbers and they dump them into 2 or 3 spreadsheets, and someone else dumps them into another spreadsheet. And eventually they wind up, it's very manual at the top level, if that makes sense. All that manual nature is doing all this math and like pulling things together. That's one thing I know. Secondly, being around all these businesses, if you're lost, most people aren't tracking, dude, as badass as everyone is that you said is in family with us, more than not of the people in there, their business is a little bit of a shit show on the back end. Like they're winning in spite of their organizational level of operations. Like some of the guys that you see on TV, if you saw how everything really happened in their back, you'd be like, bro, if that one person, if their executive assistant quit and their one sales guy and they're like 3 people away from destroying a $50 million business. Cause it's like, it's just everything. There's a lot of like perception in this stuff. And so anyone who's operating a really well-constructed business, what I know is they're tracking numbers, number one. Number two, they're breaking those numbers between leading and lagging. Number 3, they're dividing them. The math, that the percentages, which is the division, goes into a dashboard, and they're looking at a dashboard at a high level. Like they're looking at 5 to 7 numbers that are percentages. They might see total spend and total revenue, and then there's 5 or 6 percentages in the middle. And if those are on point, I don't need to see anything else. If my marketing expense is on point and my lead flow is there, and then my qualification rate, my due diligence rate, my offer rate, my contract rate, and my closing rate, that's like 5 or 6 rates. Like there's 5 or 6. If those are all on, I don't need to see any, I don't need any other information right now. I can run an entire business off of spend, lead count, clients, deal closing, whatever, and revenue. And then there's 5 or 6 percentages in the middle, and I can run a business on that. Because if one of those percentages is off, I know where to go look in the math. I know what 2 numbers divided into each other to get that percentage. So this is a big key of getting to a dashboard. I was already explaining this, but just to understand a little better, like lagging results in your health are like what you weigh, how many pounds of fat are on your body, and how many pounds of muscle. Like when you weigh yourself, that's already all happened. You're just measuring what's happened. The leading indicators are macros, like what food you eat. How many carbs are you eating? How much protein are you eating? How much fat did you eat? What kind of fat? The micros are interesting because it's your blood work. Do you need vitamin D? Is your liver not working very well? Like, is your blood sugar off and your hormones are screwed up and like you're creating cortisol because you're stressed and like you're gaining fat because of that? Like, it's not always just the food. Like your blood work has a lot to do with it. And so micros are very important. I pull my blood work quarterly or more. And then I'm tracking all my exercise, the amount of sets, reps, how much weight, the tension, the duration, my cardio, the intensity of it. There's a lot of things I'm tracking there too, but those are all leading indicators. And so when I start to do math between these, like some of the ratios I care about, I care about what my body fat percentage is and my muscle mass, because those 2 things if someone else tracked all this other stuff for me and all anybody ever gave me was like once a week, they're like, hey, your body fat is this and your muscle mass is this. I could care less what I weigh. I could care less what food I'm eating. I mean, I do. Obviously, I would have to care to get there. But if someone else was, if I had a nutritionist who just put the food in front of me and I don't, and they made sure it's the right stuff, the right protein, the right carbs, whatever. I don't really need to know any of that. Like all I really need to know to manage my health is some percentages at the top. I might track what percent of the days I walk around without feeling inflammation. Or what percent of the day is my mood good? My daughter has this app that literally you can open up a day and it says today's date is whatever. How do you feel? And there's a frowny face that's red. There's a yellow face with a straight mouth. And then there's a smiley face that's green. And you literally just click one of the three. And then underneath, if you want to put a note in, you can. And and over time, she can look at her year and be like, oh, I was really happy during January, or and what we found is seasonally, she doesn't really like cold weather. And also during the nicer months, she has more to look forward to with concerts and things that we do. So her and I realized for her to be happier, we need to get out of town during the cold months of Indiana. And we also should go, while we get into warmer areas, we should go to concerts because we like doing outdoor things together like that. And so those are KPIs for her mood. Literally, there's an app that she can track what percent of days she felt good versus blah versus bad and why. Like you can click into your month. Why was this month generally red? And it's like, oh, I got in a fight with my brother. My friend upset me. I did, whatever. All the notes are there. It's crazy, but it's this concept of like tracking. You can't say anything matters if you're not measuring it.
So how do you know what KPIs to look at? Well, I guess you're going to go into that here.
Well, it's this. It's what the leading indicators are, what is controllable and indicative.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I want at least 2 or 3 of these for every aspect of my life. These are activities. And then the results are just like, if I want to think about a lagging result, how do I know if a multifamily property I bought is good or not? Well, one of them be the cap rate.
Mm-hmm.
One of them might be how much depreciation I got off of it, cost seg or whatever. Those are like lagging. So like part of this is the science is what I'm teaching you, but the art is just sitting down and being like, I want my marriage to be better, or I want to invest in multifamily, whatever aspect of your life. Well, what would have to be true for you to be successful? Those are the lagging indicators. Like when it's over, if I went back and reflected on one area of my life, like in my business,
right?
If this 100 unit I'm buying was successful, what would that mean? Well, there's probably some kind of multipliers I care about. There's some kind of leverage on my refinance. There's, there's overall yield. There's IRR. There's these things I could look at that are all lagging indicators of of success after the fact. So I'd pick 2 or 3 that I like. And then I would say, well, what activities lead to those? What's under my control to affect those numbers? And what is indicative of affecting, how do those numbers wind up where they wind up? How does something be a 7 cap instead of a 2? Like, what would that mean? Well, there's expenses, there's operating expenses, there's revenue, okay, well, let me study those more. And I start to break in and what's under my control and what's indicative. And I start to, the art of it, that's the science is what I'm teaching you, but the art of it is just sitting down and figuring it out. Joining your group, being in family mastermind, being in boardroom, so this is something that you and I have talked about, like on this other aspect of life is like the hero's journey is like everything in life. It's every movie we've ever watched that we liked.
Right.
It's if you guys don't understand what the hero's journey is, I'm not going to get into it, but go research it. Just go Google it. There's going to be 10 million things on it. But the point is like anything that was worth happening to you, like I want to buy my first apartment buildings, and is it going to happen? It's like the movie is you're the protagonist. And the storyline is, will you get the multifamily building? It's like, will you get the girl? You know, it's like the hero's journey. Are you gonna wind up with the $100 million of assets?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And neither do you. And the movie
Right.
ensues.
Right.
And at some point in every movie, a guide shows up. Like Yoda shows up and tells Luke Skywalker, the force is already in you, or whatever. They have to give you the information you don't have. Because
Mhm.
if you watch a movie and the protagonist has a problem, and then later he solves it by himself, that's a dumb movie, because you're like, why didn't he just do it in the first place? Because he already knew how to do it. That's stupid. Or if you watch a movie where someone has there's a success is in doubt, and then I watched one the other day like this. It was called Coherence. And when it ends without the guy getting the girl or the girl getting the job or whatever the thing is that you're waiting to find out if it happens, like you getting your apartment buildings, if the movie ends without finding out that the hero wins, gets what they want, it sucks. You walk out and you're
Mhm.
like that, like at the end, the hero gets killed, boom, and then it just goes to black screen. You walk out so unsettled, like your chest is like tight and you're like
Right.
unsettled and you're like, that sucked, man. The protagonist got murdered right when they were getting ready the pot of gold. They got shot and the bad guy took the gold. Maybe they're setting up the sequel. But like the point is, like, that hero's journey is important. And so one of the main keys of it is like there's always a guide that shows up to help you. So you guys are in your own hero's journey with your investing, with your businesses and your investing strategy, you
Mhm.
know, and this group is one of the guides that's showing up for you. And the guide has to show up and give you information that you don't have, because otherwise you would have just done it by yourself in the first place. And most of the things that you guys are all trying to do is shit you've never done before.
Right.
Because when you do things you've never done, you get to have stuff you've never had. That was a really long answer to your question
Mhm.
about what
No,
numbers to track.
I like it though. But that's exactly the answer, right?
Yeah.
That's
So there's
exactly
an
the
art and a
answer.
science.
Mhm.
I want to be conscious of time too. So I'm gonna blow through these last couple slides, and I've got time to hang and do questions as long as you guys want. But um, if you want to fully implement KPIs, you got to make sure at first you get all the numbers defined, which is exactly what you just asked me. How do you know what numbers? A lot of times that requires going and talking to a coach or a business group or like a mastermind or buying books, or you have to acquire the knowledge to be like whatever area of your life. Like if you're like, hey, I'm going to go work out for the first time. What should I do? Bench press? Should I do the treadmill? Like, I don't know. Like someone has to teach you what to do.
Right.
So you'll start to learn what numbers you want to track. What always happens after that, once you figure out what numbers you should be tracking, which is an art and a science, like I said, the second thing is you got to make sure that you're consistently tracking in real time. So you're not like, oh, some days I track, some days I don't. I get 2 months behind and then I try to do my number. I pull my bank statements and I try to catch up. If you're the guy that shows up with a bag of receipts for your accountant at the end of the year, like you're not doing your KPIs very well. And so we've got to make sure that we don't need to have beautiful reports done every day, but you need to be capturing them in as close to real time as possible. So dumb example, but like if you don't track how many offers you've made, and when it's time to pull that information together, you might need to go to PandaDoc or DocuSign and just open it up and count how many offers were actually sent. So like you might not be reporting on it, but at least DocuSign tracks every offer you sent. Or if you use some other software to send an LOI or whatever, you can go in and pull it up and it's date and time stamped, and the system it's capturing the information you need. So we've got to make sure, secondly, that we're consistently getting accurate data. Because if we just do it sometimes and it's inconsistent or it's not accurate, none of the math's going to matter. Once we know that we have the base numbers we need and we know that we're consistently getting accurate numbers, the third thing is when we start doing the math. That's where we pivot from strategic to tactical. We start dividing numbers into each other. We create ratios. And that's when, again, the guide has to show up and tell us what % of deals that we offer on should close. I don't know. 2% or 100%. I don't know what's a good, I mean, I do, but like people that are new in the business don't, or what percent of LOIs should get accepted, or what percent of things that we go into due diligence for should get closed, right? We're going to track what's actually happening versus what we understand to be best practice and optimized. And we're looking at the difference between the two so we know where to like focus our attention. We can reverse engineer where we want to be in life by knowing these optimal ratios. So once I learn this step 4, this is when I can start to dream that I want to own $100 million of assets. Okay. What's the average asset value? Okay. What is okay. So that divide that into each other. That tells you how many you got to do. Well, how many, contracts do I need to be in to get that many assets closed? How many LOIs do I need accepted to get that many contracts? How many due diligences do I need to start to get that many LOIs? How many leads do I need to have to make that many LOIs? How many brokers do I need to network with to get that many opportunities? Like now I can actually reverse engineer and I start to have control over. This is when you proactively have control over your life. You've got to do this to get to that point so that I can now study what I'm doing versus what I should be doing, not at a lagging indicator, not like, well, I own 10 million and I want to own 100 million of assets. What I need to know is I'm currently making this many offers with this many leads and this many LOIs, and I should be doing this to get to where I want to go because I'm studying the activities and the ratio piece. I'm gonna jump through, like, I know I have some more stuff on this slide. It's kind of esoteric. I'm going to say this because this is like what selfishly I'm just here to support the group in any way I can. Selfishly though, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. This is a model that I've been working on. There's a million versions of this. I've been operating under this model for many years with clients and myself. It's produced great results. It's kind of in spiritual talk, but it's really for business as well. And it's really interesting because this is how you can do anything in your life. It starts right here with alignment. If your goals aren't in alignment with who you are and what you really want, if you're like, I hate my job, so I want to own a bunch of cash flow. I'm going to go try to buy a bunch of properties. And I want $100,000 a month coming in. If you just randomly pluck that out of nowhere and it's not in alignment with where you are and where you want to be, the cool thing is life will still work itself out. You're just going to take a long road to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is study. Like if you say you want to buy 1,000 doors, why? And whatever that answer is, I would say, well, what will that do for you? And whatever that answer is, I'll say, well, why does that matter? And whatever that answer is, I'm going to say, well, what will that do? I'm going to do that 2 or 3 times with you. And then we're going to get somewhere. And if we can't get somewhere that matters, your why is off. Like your alignment is off. And so when you're out of alignment, the problem is the harder you work, the harder everything gets, because life has a way of pulling you back towards alignment. Everything's in flow. Like all rivers lead to the ocean, kind of is like this idea of flow. Everything's flowing in your alignment for you. And the more you get out of alignment, you feel it as resistance. Like I'm supposed to be going this way, but I'm going this way. Well, my flow is still going this way. It's running into me. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel it as resistance. And I'm like, damn, why? Like I'm working harder than ever and I'm getting less results than ever. Like that is a really high indicator that you're not in alignment with what you should be doing in life.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we go to Austin every other month and drink ayahuasca and smoke DMT and meet with shaman and cry about why our parents like wounded us and all these other things. It all translates into why I need $100 million business. So this alignment is about location and destination. And one thing I'll just say on that really quickly is everybody in the GPS analogy is always like super invested in the destination. Like they're overly invested in where they're going to wind up. Well, I live in Indiana. If I want to go to Florida, I can drive for like 17 hours before I even need to know what part of Florida I'm going to. But if I don't plug my address in, my current location into the GPS, or it can't locate me, it can't even tell me which turn to turn left or right out of the driveway. And a lot of times knowing your location, your current to give you that first turn is kind of self-assessment. It's auditing, it's being honest about where you are. What is your credit? What is your available capital? What is your capacity to underwrite? You know, how much work can you get done with CapEx? What's your wherewithal to understand this business? So some of that's just this honest audit that usually takes a third. Again, the guide needs to show up in your life. This is why most big companies hire like PricewaterhouseCoopers to come in and audit their business. Because you just can't audit yourself because you have blind spots. Like you just can't. It always takes an outside source can always give you more accurate information about where you are. And so that's number one. Number two, like, well, I already said it. Number one is this location piece, but number two, what I already said is like having good goals. So if your goal is like, I want to own $100 million of asset and you don't really know why, that's a shitty goal. It's okay because you still win. So go ahead and try it. And later when you find out that wasn't what you really wanted, it's like when the GPS is telling you to turn right and then go straight down the street and you turn left anyway, and then it has to recalibrate. But what you didn't realize is you drove over a river and now you're on a one-way street, and that street is an on-ramp to a highway that you have to drive on for 20 minutes before you can get off. And like 10 minutes of going down the street turned into like an hour-long drive. And, like that's what happens in life. You didn't intend something, you meet someone you didn't know you're going to meet, you have a kid you didn't expect, you get fired from your day job. Like these things happen that just create, interesting stuff in your life. But my point is when we get really honest about what's all those interesting things that have led us to be who we are and where we are, that's really important to figure out, to be honest about it, and then to know where we're headed. So that's alignment. That's the hardest part we got to understand here. If we get that part right, all this other shit works pretty easily. Once we're in alignment, we got to be grateful. This is where the woo-woo, spiritual stuff comes in, but it's not woo-woo. Everyone thinks it is. But the reality is it's just, if you're more masculine or don't get into the woo-woo, just think of this as ownership and accountability. Like, do you own being where you are because of the decisions you made in life? You guys are all right where you're supposed to be based on the decisions you've made and the cards you were dealt when you were born, which wasn't really in your control. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to deal with. So I can become grateful, which again can be very positive, or at least own where you're at. So I get alignment. I know where I am and where I want to be. I get into it's important that we get into the state of ownership, accountability, and great gratitude, because the next step is when we set our intention. If we don't get grateful and we don't own it, if we're a victim because we don't have accountability and we're not grateful, we're pissed, like, oh, my boss fired me and now I'm screwed. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this house. And like, I'm never going to retire. And you're in this like victim, like negative state. And then you set your intention on what you want to do and why. It's not going to go well, which again is fine, because eventually it'll lead you down the wrong path. And then you'll find out it's a dead end and all these things work in your favor. It's just the harder path. So the easier path would be to follow this. And so when I get my intention coming from a good place, alignment, a good place, and then I set my intention on which is what I want to do and why. So like, I want financial security because of these reasons. It's not really how I'm going to do it. I could do it with 1,000 houses. I could do it with 1,000 apartment, 1,000 door, complex. I could do it with 5 200 door complexes. I could buy, whatever amount of duplexes. I could go buy a mobile home park. I could actually go invest in the stock market if I'm know how to play that game. It doesn't really matter. Like, how it's going to play out is not part of this intention. The intention is more about separating exactly what's going to happen, which are expectations. It's separating your intention so that you're really focused on what you want and why when you're in this grateful place of ownership out of alignment. And it comes down, it's very connected. Those first three are very connected. Then we get down to where we spend 70% of our life, which is just doing shit. That first three things are all about being who you are, like be, do, have. This is how you be what you want to be, or figure out what you want to be. And we get down here is where we're doing things. And we want those to be in alignment with those first three categories. And so this is where we spend 70%. This is why you go to the meetup when you think, man, I think there's gonna be a bunch of douches here, but I'm gonna go because there might be the one broker that I need to talk to. There might be the one lender that I want to run into. Right. And you spend a lot of time here, but if we just jumped, a lot of us skipped the first ones and just we're running away from something instead of towards it. And we just know we don't want our current situation. So we skip all three and we just jump down to start doing things. This is where you get into a hamster wheel and you might have success, but you don't really like your life. Once we've taken action, every once in a while, we need to come up and we need to ask ourselves, what did we experience? When I did that thing, once I took action, what happened? This is being present. Like, was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? What did I learn? And it's not about, having one perspective. It's about seeing all the perspectives. Like if a deal goes bad and it sours and you went hard on earnest money and you lose it and you spend a bunch of money on, environmental studies and whatever, and scoping sewer lines and all these things. And by the way, I've done this on some commercial property. Man, that 100 grand, that 20 grand or 100 grand you lost. One of the perspectives is that it might have taught you what you needed to not get your ass handed to you 10 times higher on something, 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
I was like paying for part of your college in commercial property investing. So it's important to understand the experience. Then the end of this, kind of getting to the end, is like this integration process. What did I learn from that experience? I'm being open-minded and curious. Like maybe things that felt bad, which by the way, it feels bad to lose money. So you can feel bad about it for a little bit. And then you want to get over it and be like, okay, what am I going to do about it now? What did I learn? How could have this been in my favor? How can I put this into my advantage? How can I learn from it? How can I leverage it? And so that's called integration. That's integrating the experiences we've had based on the actions we took. Then what we need to do is based on what we learned from this process of integrating. And by the way, most of you guys or anyone watching this replay later, you skip this step all the time because you're all too impatient and you're not willing to like really be honest about what you learned. This is a commonly missed step in anything. Especially if you go do heavy, psychedelics, which I'm only half promoting right now. I'm not even really fully promoting those. But if you want to go to some big spiritual retreat, it also could be going to church if that's your thing. Like, and you listen to a sermon and you're like, dang, man, that guy was talking to me. And then you go home and you don't do anything about it. If you don't go home and ask, how can I implement that? How does that change my day at the office tomorrow? Like literally, what am I going to do different with my wife tomorrow because of what I just learned? It's really just entertainment at that point because you didn't integrate it. So sit with yourself whenever an experience was interesting and created some emotion in you. That's a key that you should probably sit down with it and process it. And then once we learn something, we realign. How does that affect our alignment? Maybe it doesn't at all. Nope. It's just good information. Boom, back into the loop. Double check my alignment. Refocus my gratefulness and my ownership. Go down to my intention, see if I need to change what I'm doing and why. Most of this stuff, once you get it locked in, it stays that way many times for 2 to 10 years at a time. Once these are really in place, you go through these timelines in your life that will last many times for 10 years or so, give or take. And so those don't have to change a lot once they're really in place. You spend a lot of time taking action and seeing what happened, learning from it, realigning, and doing it again. You want to quarterly, especially annually, you want to check your overall alignment. Quarterly, you probably want to come up for air and just look real quick, but annually you want to come up and go spend a couple of days at an Airbnb somewhere and really think about who you are and what you want and why. But largely, again, for probably 10 years, give or take at a time, once you nail those, once you get into alignment, gratitude, intention, like that stuff kind of stays hooked. And as long as you have a regular practice of checking in on it, you can really focus on that loop of taking action, learning, and changing your plan, and taking action, learning, changing your plan. And just, that's why they say it takes like 10 years to master something. That's about the time that it's going to be working and you're kind of ready for the next thing. Or 10,000 hours, whatever, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Say it. Okay. That was a lot. And I hate this slide because it's so full of talking like words. But it's in here for you later. This is just homework. Like if you want to start writing down what you do and start looking to see what's a leading indicator, and then start tracking this and this is just like, these are just 5 steps you can follow to try to implement what we talked about. Probably the best thing you can do is just watch this replay again if it's available somewhere, hopefully, or read the slides. Yeah, this one says questions. You just can't see it. I'm just kidding. So I hope that, like, this group's very quiet. I hope that you guys all took something away from this. Like I said, I've got plenty of time for Q&A to talk, but this is heavy stuff. But I'm literally telling you, if you're not using these concepts in every area of your life right now, you are definitely missing out because you're just not paying attention. Like, that was all information and math and processes on how to pay attention and figure out what matters and then make sure it happens. Because otherwise you wake up like I did 10 years into my first business and I hated everything everyone thought I was a big deal in my city. My RIA, these masterminds, all these people. And I literally hated my life. And if you go out into the ocean without a rudder and a sail, like, the only way I can say it is in French, is like, you're fucked. So like, you just wind up wherever you wind up. And I would rather you go out with the intention of putting the sails up and the rudder, but knowing when to move them and use them to your favor, but also being okay with when the wind blows different and things happen. So how it plays out, I would be okay with, but I'd keep focusing on what I want, why, and then let the how unfold. It's a beautiful way to live life.
Yep.
That's a lot.
I think everybody's quiet because they're just, taking in everything that you said, because there was a lot of information here. There's a lot of nuggets. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, Dan and Natalie, you got a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you for that, by the way, Steve. That was very informative. I feel like you're basically speaking to me,
Good.
to us in a sense, but at the risk of sounding very novice and like a knucklehead, how do you track this? What are you using tick marks of how many times how many lines you submit? Is it just tick marks, and then you divide them into each other? Is that it?
Yeah, man. Like, whatever works for you. I'm an Excel geek. So for me to set up like a super tricked out Excel with formula, like, it takes me, I can do that faster than I could with a yellow notepad. But if it takes a yellow notepad next to your desk and you literally just write the categories and you just put a tick on it every time you like look at a property, and then every time you say, hey, send me more info, let me do some like pre due diligence, and you just put a tick. It literally doesn't matter how you do it. And I will say this, I tried to say this earlier, but I'll say it again. The more manual the process is, the better it's going to be, because it's forcing you to think about it.
Okay.
The more you think you automate this to read that number and automatically all that stuff, it just has a tendency to be like, you almost try to set it and forget it. Like, literally set it and forget it. I can just tell you, you're going to forget the numbers. And by the way, they're probably not going to be accurate, because whatever formula you created to automatically figure it all, it's probably going to be broken at some point. And so the more manual, the better. And so if you're techie and you can use spreadsheets, that's really good, because you can have it do the math for you with formulas. And that way, because if you're doing it on a yellow notepad and you're using the calculator on your phone, you'll probably type the numbers in wrong at some point. Human error, bound to happen. But the more manual, the better, in my opinion, because it's forcing you to pay attention. I would just double check your numbers. Whenever you run numbers one way, run them another way to check. I don't know if you have kids. It's kind of like new math, like, which is dumb, but you got to check your math. But yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Whatever you realize is a reasonable way to do it and it works for you, don't get caught up in anyone telling you how you should do it. I don't care how ghetto it is.
Good. That's amazing, man. KPIs, folks. Right? Sit down with yourselves, figure out what your KPIs are, and start running them. Right? But it's from what I'm gathering, and tell me if I'm wrong, Steve, the important ones are the leading metrics, right?
Yep.
The
Yeah, they're
leading
all
indicators.
important.
They're all important, but when we're starting out and we're going, we don't really have lagging to really check on, right? So we got to focus on getting those leading indicators in and keeping them going, right? Just like we talked
Yep.
about, keep your marketing going, keep your networking going, keep your offers going out there. These are all your leading indicators, and then you can, once you have enough leading indicators moving, you can start seeing what are the lagging ones and pick and start focusing on those. And another thing I got from you was it's easier to hire people in your business than it is to get partners. And I wanted to add something to that, because partners, you can't really tell a partner, hey, do this or do that. You're going, dude, I'm a partner in the business. What are you telling me what to do? All right. It's all that ego thing, right? But when you're hiring someone, this is your job criteria. This is what you have to do. This is what I'm paying you to do. And if you're not doing that, then we got to renegotiate. We got to talk. We got to figure something else out. So I like that. The thing is that we have to figure out is how do we get the money to pay for these people?
Well, the beauty of it is until you have enough volume going and cash flow,
You should be doing
there's
it
a lot
yourself.
of people that can get paid on the deal.
Hmm.
There's attorneys that will get paid at the closing.
Right.
They still want paid for their work, by the way.
Right.
But there's a lot of some brokers will be like help with due diligence, to get paid a rip on the deal.
Mhm.
In this business, you can make it very transactional. If you have to in the beginning, I know it's kind of like making someone a partner to give equity, but there's ways around that without making them like a general partner in the business. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a way to give them a piece of what's going on
Mhm.
to get their effort without making them your business partner. You may have a
Right.
deal partner, but they're not your business partner.
Right.
And it is always easier, especially when we get out of the investment. If we're just talking about business in general, it's just like if you have a startup and you can get all the way through, like, and sell it without bringing on venture capital or, whatever, you're
Mhm.
always going to make more.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. If you can get a business up and running without a partner, 9 times, well, I'm going to say 19 out of 20 times, you're going to be better off, because partnerships can, they can help for a while. Most of it's just making you feel more comfortable. It's about fear.
Yep.
But they just, 1 in 20 is what I'll give it. I mean, I don't have those aren't real KPIs. That's my estimation. I don't have math on that somewhere, but I'll tell you, I would say it's 1 out of 20 times where you bring a partner and you're like, thank God I had that guy or girl to do something I didn't know how to do.
Mhm.
Because you can always pay somebody a fee. You can get a fractional CFO to put together a plan for you. You can pay a vendor to do something. You can pay a consultant. You can
Right.
hire a coach. Like, there's so many ways to get the things done you need to get done. And people can get paid at closing. Like I said, you can delay closing. You can do all kinds of stuff. Um, I pad a lot of that stuff into my costs, into my management fees and my CapEx. And I build in like consultants, and I pad all that stuff. And so when draws are coming in and payments are getting made on stuff, it's like also paying for the other people that are involved.
Gotcha. This is great.
Is everybody more confused than they were before this started?
I think there's a lot to think about, right? There's a lot of information there that we have to unpack, and everybody individually has to unpack it for themselves and figure out what their leading indicators are, where they're lagging, and how to support and pick it up, right? Everybody, and that's what we're here for, right? We're here to,
Yep.
just like you said, we're the outside force looking in, going, hey, this is what's going on. You're spending too much time on bullshit things and not on the things that are going to get you to where you go. There's bullshit KPIs and then there's real KPIs.
Yep.
Right?
If you guys want to start super simple, pick 2 or 3 areas of your life and just give yourself a score of 1 to 10, how you think you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just a general overall, how's my marriage? How's my health? How's my business?
Yep.
And then underneath that, think about, well, what if I like, what would you want to be in the near in a year or two? So if I'm a 6 in something and I want to be an 8, just start to think about like what would be different. What would have to happen for me to be an 8 versus a 6? Whatever those things are, those are lagging numbers. You're beginning to have some lagging numbers to shoot towards. And then you ask yourself, well, what activities would produce those? So you can start this introspective thing and just pick 2 or 3 areas of your life, pick 1 or 2 lagging numbers and 1 or 2 activities, and just track 3 or 4 numbers for 2 or 3 areas. You could do it on a yellow notepad, like you can do it on your phone, and it can be very generalized. And then later you'll start to be like, well, maybe I should do this instead. And it'll layer. You just need to be in the habit of ranking and scoring yourself of where you are versus where you want to be and what's in the middle that needs to change. And how do I pay attention to it? Like that's the general theme. Where am I? Where do I want to be? What numbers in there? What leads from where I am to where I want to be? And what can I manipulate? Just pick some damn numbers and try. Like maybe you find out these aren't good ones and you switch it, but creating the habit of just getting into ranking, rating, and tracking so that you're always looking at numbers. For me, anyone who asks for any of my help, it's hard for me to ever give it to them if I can't see all their numbers. Like
Right.
I'm just in a habit of all my decisions are always based on numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a
That's why
habit.
we have our accountability tracker, our KPI tracker every week that you guys got to fill out and track your numbers. That's all it is, man. Steve, thank you so much, man. You brought so much. You brought so much today, man. And I'm sure the people that were here and the people that are going to be listening to this that we send it out to, they're going to get a ton out of it, man. Thank you so much. And I'd love to have you back so we can talk about that team building strategy as well. And just continue this. So this was phenomenal, man. And I look forward to seeing you in November.
Yeah.
In Austin.
Yes. And what am I going to see in September too? Family.
Yes. That's right.
Bro, we're going to be hanging out. We're going to do a masterclass on hiring. We're going to go to family together and we're going to go do ayahuasca together.
That's right.
I'm going to hang out with you 4 times in like 2 months. Like this is
I love it.
We're going to be family.
Great. Yep. You know it, man.
All right. Take care, guys. It was great seeing you all.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here, guys. We'll talk soon. Be well.